This day and age we're living in gives cause for apprehension, with speed and new invention and things like third dimension. Yet we get a trifle weary with Mr. Einstein's theory. So we must get down to earth at times, relax, relieve the tension, no matter what the progress or what may yet be proved. The simple facts of life are such, they cannot be removed. You must remember this, a kiss is still a kiss. A sigh is just a sigh, just a sigh, just a sigh. The fundamental things apply as time goes by. As time goes by. And when two lovers woo, they still say I love you. On that you can rely, no matter what the future brings as time goes by. Time goes by. Moonlight and love songs never out of date. Hearts full of passion, jealousy and hate. Woman needs man and man must have his mate. That no one can deny. It's still the same old story, a fight for love and glory, a case of do or die, of do or die. The world will always welcome lovers as time goes by. The world will always welcome lovers as time goes by.
And that old time feeling comes and goes in the rain, like an old man with his checkers, dying to find a game. That old time feeling plays for beer and bars, like an old time blues picker who don't recall who you are. And that old time feeling limps through the night on a crutch, like an old soldier wondering if he's paid too much. Old time feeling rocks and spits and cries, like an old lover remembering a girl with clear blue eyes. sneaking down the hall like an old gray cat in winter.
Hello, my friends.
Keeping close.
Good to see you all again. Today I have a shorter live stream planned than usual. It's about the topic of architecture, and I made a Twitter post about this not too long ago. I believe that this example, the Library of Birmingham, Europe's biggest library, allegedly, I guess, provides an excellent case study, an excellent little microcosm of the social engineering program that white European countries have been put through over the past 150 years or so. The transformation that the Library of Birmingham, and I'm talking about England here, the Library of Birmingham has gone through, this transformation, I think shows just an excellent little microcosm of the process that our entire culture has gone through. These are the three iterations, the three manifest forms of the Library of Birmingham. First, the Victorian Gothic style, then the brutalist, modernist style, and finally, the current postmodern high-tech style. I want to get into a lot of the details here. I want to get into who has been behind these creations and why it has transformed in the way that we have seen. And by the way, I hope my mic level is good. Can I get a confirmation in chat that the mic level's good? I wrote this little Twitter thread, and I guess I'll just read the first post of the thread to give a brief overview. And I find it interesting that, I come up with this idea independently. And I'm positive that if I told a normie this thesis, someone says, I thought you were going to talk about something else because a workshop teaching kids about consent to sex just got canceled at this library. Wow. Interesting. But anyway, if I told this idea, this little theory, to a normie, somebody who's uninitiated into our understanding of the world, I am positive that this would seem wild and conspiratorial, that these ideas would be perceived as fringe, as strange. People out there don't have an appreciation for how vast the vision of the elites actually is. The vision that they have, which works its way into every facet of society, and that how they use every possible means to advance their agenda. And architecture is a big way that they have done that. So let me just read. These three versions of the Birmingham Library in Birmingham, England, presented here, show three stages of the West, which have unfolded over the last 150 years. First, greatness. Second, negation. And third, the reconstitution under a new order. The transformation, or the transforming architecture of the Birmingham Library, when considered in the light of a holistic understanding of our civilization's recent history, reflects a process which occurred in the social order as a whole through successive generations over the last century and a half. The late 1800s to early 1900s were a period of greatness, down to the level of the individual man. The world wars in the following decades were a time of intense socio-cultural negation. The concepts and values of the previous order were comprehensively questioned, critiqued, and finally disposed of. Now we are living in the final stage of this civilizational coup, the attempt at establishing a new order of foundational concepts, ethics, religion, and even a new race to populate the new civilization. So, there's more to this thread. Dill Bob says, "Hail, great to see you uploading. Thank you. Great to see you guys joining me in the chat." When I posted this, sometimes even when I post things like this, I think to myself, am I reading too much into this? Am I, trying to squeeze an interpretation out of this when really I'm just sort of twisting it to fit my own ideas of the world? I wonder this sometimes. And over the last few days, I've been looking into what other architecture historians have said about this progression, this stylistic transformation. And I came across, in the process, a fellow called Simon Thurley, who we are going to watch some clips from lectures that he's given at Gresham College. And when I found this lecture series, the whole thing is worth watching, by the way. The whole thing is worth getting into and watching the whole way through, because he's a great lecturer. But there were moments, as I was watching this lecture series, where he says things that basically, it felt like he was pulling ideas out of my own head and confirming my thoughts exactly. So we're going to watch some clips from Simon as the stream goes by. So let's begin at the beginning with this version of the Birmingham Library. Who built it and why? This version, the original Birmingham Library, which is hardly even mentioned on the Wikipedia page. You have to actually go to the architect's page. John Henry Chamberlain. He worked predominantly in the Victorian Gothic style and was one of the earliest and foremost practical exponents of the ideas of architectural theorist John Ruskin, who selected Chamberlain as one of the trustees of his Guild of St. George. Okay, so basically the brains, the philosophy behind the Victorian library was John Ruskin. And John Ruskin wrote a whole book on what he believed architecture should embody, the values that should be made manifest by architecture. He wrote a whole book called The 7 Lamps of Architecture. And to summarize his 7 lamps, his 7 values, we have 1, sacrifice, dedication of man's craft to God as visible proofs of man's love and obedience. This is something that you'll never hear any architect say today, that their architecture should represent or express sacrifice, dedication to God. That would be ridiculous. You'd be laughed out of the architecture wing of a university if you said that this is one of the main values that you want to express with architecture. 2, truth. Truth. Something that another concept that would get you laughed out of a lot of university wings today. I mean, just think of the What is a Woman documentary with Matt Walsh, and how university professors get offended by the idea of truth, that there is an objective truth. Truth is expressed in architecture, according to Ruskin, by handcrafted and honest display of materials and structure. Truth to materials and honest display of construction were bywords, since the serious Gothic revival had distanced itself from the whimsical Gothic of the 18th century. 3, power. This is actually something that is still meant to be expressed by modernist buildings, but I think this, in Ruskin's idea and Ruskin's framework, was very different from the modernist vision. According to Ruskin, buildings should be thought of in terms of their massing and reach towards the sublimity of nature by the action of the human mind upon them and the organization of physical effort in constructing buildings. This leads into 4, beauty, aspiration towards God expressed in ornamentation drawn from nature, his creation. So because God created nature, and we are a part of nature, and nature is made specifically by the hand of the divine, according to Ruskin, we ought to emulate and build our buildings with ornamentation and designs that are coherent to nature, that are inspired by and allude to the beauty of nature. It should fit in to the natural surroundings. It should feel at home within the natural surroundings of the building. Well, that's another thing that is completely rejected by modernist architectural theory. According to the modernist theory, ornamentation, especially in the brutalist stage of things, ornamentation itself is antiquated, redundant, meant to be transcended, meant to be rendered obsolete by progress. 5, life. Buildings should be made by human hands, so that the joy of masons and stone carvers is associated with the expressive freedom given to them. Once again, another thing completely turned on its head by modernism. Instead of buildings expressing the life of those who built it, buildings are now, in the modernist view, best when they are produced industrially, produced by automation, by machines. Ruskin hated the idea of a building being made solely by machines. He wanted his buildings to be made by hand, to express this life force that literally went into building the structure. 6, memory. Buildings should respect the culture from which they have developed. I don't think I need to say anything about that. With regards to the modernist paradigm, we all know that is explicitly 100% rejected by the modernist paradigm. 7, obedience. No originality for its own sake, but conforming to the finest among existing English values, in particular expressed through the English early decorated Gothic as the safest choice in style. So these are clearly values of the old traditional order. And you could see it in just the beauty of this building. I mean, look at some of these pictures. This is the type of library that feels like a temple to learning. It feels like a place that inspires awe. It feels like a place that inspires all of these values. All of these values of the 7 lamps that were just mentioned. All the details, all the references to classical architecture. It's the type of building that, honestly, if you're a conscious, intelligent person, this is the type of building that makes you feel like you want to be a better person. That it makes you feel like if to deserve to use this building, you must elevate yourself as well. That's what this type of building feels like to me. So of course, it had to be destroyed. And one final thing about the original Library of Birmingham. It was, when it was created by Chamberlain, the funding, the commission for it, came directly from local Birmingham elites. This was a local project designed to express local values, English values, traditional values, and this is something to remember when we move forward into history, where we see the commissions for these public buildings move away from the local. They move away from anything rooted within that location and get taken over by these faceless international corporate giants. So I've said a lot. Let me play you a clip from Simon Thurley, who, by the way, like I said, he's a major authority in architectural history. He's one of the most knowledgeable people in English architectural history that you could find. All kinds of commendations, all kinds of awards, served in high positions of English heritable or heritage foundations, has appeared on all kinds of TV shows. To any normie, any kind of, bug person, this is the type of expert that cannot be questioned. So let me just play a quick clip.
So, that is the background. What was happening during the 1150s, the 1160s, and the 1170s was a big period of stylistic experimentation. For the men of the 12th century, style was important, but it was important because it expressed hierarchy. In the Middle Ages, the most high-status architecture was about the ritualized display of power. It was about ceremony. It was about ritual. It was about liturgy. These were the driving forces behind the stylistic appearance of buildings. Their structure and their decoration expressed the social, the economic, and religious hierarchies that went on inside them. And so the architectural setting of any particular activity, whether it be eating a meal or praying to God, had to be suitable to its importance and the importance of the people who were doing it.
Right there. Exactly what I've just been saying. The old styles, the traditional styles, expressed the hierarchy of the nation. The religious, the cultural, the political hierarchy, and the values that come out of that hierarchy. So, I'm not making this up. This is clearly something that is meant to be expressed by architecture. And furthermore, I'm going to show you another clip, if I could find it.
By a list of subscribers. People subscribe to these volumes. And almost every single major architect of the day can be found in that list of subscribers at the front, including Edwin Lutyens, C.R. Ashby, W.D. Carrow, and many, many others. And the book starts off in its introduction with the following, and I'm just going to read to you what it says. One of the chief reasons that make this particular period of such supreme importance is that the house building is indigenous to this soil.
So he's talking about the Victorian period, the 1800s, late 1800s, and pre-war 1900s. The architecture was indigenous to the English.
It is as national as the name with which it is stamped. It breathes the restful yet vigorous spirit of the time that gave its birth, and with all is characterized by a semi-contained homeliness, redolent of the life and customs of the Englishman of the day, and impossible to be either originated or imitated by its continental contemporaries. This was an incredibly nationalistic view of English architecture, one that was incredibly powerful, particularly after the First World War, when England wanted to express its difference from the countries elsewhere in Europe. And
so, nationalistic architecture. This is what this library was meant to express. The national indigenous character of England. And furthermore, here's one more clip where he goes even a step farther. It's not just the indigenous national character, it is a rural character that much of this Victorian architecture was meant to express.
Rural settlements. I mean, there's sort of no comparison between the two, is there? After their most successful product, sunlight, soap. These settlements were developments that got workers away from the brutal terraces that had characterised most of the new industrial towns, such as Middlesbrough, which you see here. What it did was allowed workers to live in traditional buildings in rural settlements. I mean, there's sort of no comparison between the two, is there really? What was different, though, about the garden suburbs is that they were funded by their inhabitants and not by their employees.
Once again, the theme of being funded by the local people. When these kinds of projects are funded by the local people, you get something that reflects their indigenous character. But this is taken away from them after the Second World War. And these projects are co-opted and ultimately completely taken over by the high government, which I would argue basically suffered its own coup after World War II.
First to be built was Letchworth Garden Suburb, followed by Hampstead Garden Suburb, which you see a photograph here from the air. These housing developments, about which I could give an entire lecture, were important because they presented a view of England and of English architecture that was essentially rural, vernacular, and native. The types of houses were Tudor or Queen Anne. A few were Neo-Georgian, like the ones I'm showing you here, and they were laid out amidst trees and parks. This was the counter-urban. This was quasi-rural. And the architectural styles that are being used are the styles that I talked about at the start. Tudor, this Christopher Wren style, styles that were believed to be uniquely English. This was a recreation of the English countryside in the town.
And furthermore, so I'm just trying to establish here for you guys the fact that this style, this trend in architecture that existed prior to World War II was explicitly indigenous and nationalistic and opposed to the modernist transformations that were taking place. And not only was it the common people or the local elites that were championing this style, but as we'll see in the next clip, the leading politician of his day. I think he was like a 2-time prime minister, deputy prime minister, a very powerful politician of the 1920s and 30s. Was a huge proponent of this desire to celebrate the indigenous native people and their character in England through architecture.
Careful handling. He strove and succeeded to be a figure that rose above politics, trying to evoke images that he believed would unify the nation. And these images were traditional Christian images: charity, patience, respect, generosity of spirit. But they were all underpinned by the idea of rural heritage. The image of Britain that Baldwin encapsulated was one of him being the countryman. And Baldwin the countryman was a central part of his appeal, particularly in the early years of his premiership. This is Haresfield Beacon that was handed over to the National Trust in January 1931. And Baldwin was asked to come and mark the acquisition of it. And in his speech, which was published, he said, "I think it answers to a very deep and profound instinct of the British people. The country represents the internal values and the eternal traditions from which we must never allow ourselves to be separated." In June 1931, he unveiled another memorial stone, very keen on unveiling stones, this time at Old Sarum, the beautiful former site of Salisbury. And here he asked, what was the value of Old Sarum? The site value arrived at by any value can be but very small, but the value to us and to England is infinite. The spiritual value is beyond all computation. So here we have the leading politician of his age defining himself through the countryside.
The leading politician of the day, of the 1930s, defining himself, associating himself with the rural, vernacular, indigenous English people. And this is what the architecture was meant to express. So if we know, based on these clips, that the common man, when he was given the opportunity to fund his own building projects, chose styles that reflected their own native indigenous character, and even the politicians of that time, the 1930s, supported that and reinforced the nationalism and pride in their own native culture. What the hell happened after World War II to cause this to become this? What happened? My proposition, and obviously you all know, is that there was a coup. There was a power shift that happened during and after World War II, where the native local elites were supplanted by international elites, of which we all know the tribe, a specific tribe. So how is it that this brutalism, the way I put it is, I'll just read the Twitter post. This library, the Victorian library, was destroyed in the early 1970s for no good reason, basically. No good reason. Apparently just to build a road. What would that prime minister who said that this site had invaluable worth or value to the English people as a spiritual heritage, what would he say about destroying this in favor of this? This has just as much spiritual value to the English people. So, for no good reason, they just wanted to build a road there, knocked it down, and in place, in place of the stated reason, I propose that it was done in the spirit of negation. The next stage was negation. You can't just take the old traditional culture and suddenly put a new one on top of it. You have to go through a period of purification, of cleansing, of negation, of critique. So this brutalism represented an age of critique, an age of looking at the traditional values, inverting those values, critiquing those values, and ultimately leading up to a total rejection of those values to build a sort of clean slate upon which the new order could be established. The new elite, which took power after the World Wars, wanted to strip the people of their old values and culture, and brutalism was one of the many methods that they experimented with to achieve that. Brutalism is promoted as, quote, honest, pragmatic, scientific, but in reality, most people with healthy aesthetic sensibilities find it cold, uninviting, and depressing, to be honest. But even if we take it at face value, the pragmatism and rationality of this style represents vacuous values. You can't base a culture on pragmatism and rationality. So it plays right into the agenda of promoting atheistic, materialistic, individualistic, that paradigm of the modern world, which has stripped us of our unique ethnic heritage, culture, and values. And to reinforce this, let's go back to Simon Thurley here, who has a few things to say on this matter.
Confirmed modernist who worked in a native tradition. He was to ask in 1922, and I quote, whether it is possible to go modern and still be British. The battle lines have been drawn up. Internationalism versus indigenous culture. Renovation versus conservatism. The industrial versus the pastoral. The functional versus the futile.
So there he goes. That's what people understood this. That these styles represented battle lines. International versus indigenous. Renovation versus conservatism. Industrialism versus pastoralism. And here we have more confirmatory statements from Thurley.
As I said before, this comprising the Purcell Room, the Hayward Gallery, no windows, and a door deliberately hidden away because they didn't want to have any hierarchy in the buildings. They wanted to get away from the old pre-war notion of a building with hierarchy. So the hierarchy is banished. You can't really tell where to get in, you can't really tell where to look out.
Hierarchy is banished. The pre-war notion of a building expressing hierarchy, banished. Furthermore,
were wrong. During the 1970s, as this realisation dawned, public expenditure moved away from the city centres, thank goodness, and moved to the motorways in the countryside, culminating in the building of the M25. So, this was an environment fundamentally different from that of the old Europe, whose civilization had been so eloquently chronicled in Kenneth Clark's series that I started off with. This was a world where, in the realms of architecture at any rate, the state was now the patron, and the architects were all too often faceless and angry men intent on sweeping away the buildings that had come before, buildings that represented an old social order which the new politics in the new world wanted to replace.
I'm going to play that again because it's just such an amazingly frank statement from this guy. Not only is he saying, the power of the common people and the local elites was removed. Buildings were no longer commissioned by individual elites or local elites or even common people coming together to create a project. It was now fully under the authority of the state, which, as I argued, suffered a coup during and after World War II. And the architects that used to wish to express the native, indigenous, traditional culture of their people were replaced by, quote, faceless and angry men intent on sweeping away the buildings that had come before. Let's listen to this one more time because it's just, I might clip this.
The architects were all too often faceless and angry men intent on sweeping away the buildings that had come before, buildings that represented an old social order which the new politics in the new world wanted to replace.
That says it all. That says it all. And you can see it, I believe, this is some of my own speculation, you can see it in this concrete monstrosity. I believe that, this is my opinion, concrete is the structural, architectural equivalent of plastic. It is fully, you can form it into any shape. It is an extremely industrial material. It is laid and formed in the structure primarily by machines. And all these old values of the lamps of Ruskin are inverted by the concrete. It is meant to represent a clean slate. And when you look into people who discuss brutalism in particular, brutalism is, the philosophy behind brutalism is in many ways like explicit inversions of these 7 lamps of Ruskin, especially with regards to beauty and ornamentation. Like I said earlier, ornamentation was seen as sort of a backwards, primitive impulse. And we enlightened people of the scientific technological age, we understand that as things progress, ornamentation is thrown away. Beauty is thrown away. This is the sort of philosophy that was behind the creation of these buildings. And people in general didn't like it. It was revolting to most people. Look at what people say about modern art in general here.
Had taken place was the purchase that patronage of public institutions brought were obviously very welcomed, but I think artists themselves disliked the shift away from being having the patronage being an individual to the patronage being
Maximo says this is like a precursor to tearing down statues in America. Yeah, it's part of the same project, for sure.
By this change. The massive audiences that patronage of public institutions brought were obviously very welcomed, but I think artists themselves disliked the shift away from being having the patronage being an individual to the patronage being institutions. As usual, it took this change to take a little bit longer to come to Britain, but the moment that the British public realised that this change had taken place was the purchase by the Tate Gallery of a work of art called Equivalent 8 by Carl Andre in 1966. Some of you may remember it. It became known as the pile of bricks. 120 fire bricks arranged in a rectangular formation. This was a direct challenge to people's perception of what art was. It was also a challenge to what the role of a publicly funded institution was in directing and leading public taste. Well, you will probably all remember what public taste thought about this. This is a builder saying, the repose and calm of this work of art reflects the simplicity and restraint of my earlier period. The symbolism remains personal and eludes exact interpretation.
You hear, by the way, how the audience giggles. They giggle a little bit when he says, you all remember public, the reaction from the public when this modern shit was coming out. And yeah, they're so dumb. They just didn't know how beautiful it was. They didn't know how important it was. They're just so backwards. The average person, oh my God, we're light years ahead of them.
Or there was this a jokey thing here. Why pay Tate Gallery price £4,000, our price £500 before VAT, a pile of bricks in the window? And perhaps more hostile, what a load of rubbish. So
the average people did not like this. They didn't like this whole damn trend of modernism, whether it was in art, fine art in the museums, or whether it was the architecture of the museum itself, or the library, or the university, or the, any major public building that underwent this transformation. The average people did not like it. It was done to socially engineer them. It was done to rip them out of their roots, to get them to forget the traditional values. I honestly don't think that this building was ever meant to be liked. I don't think that they really thought people would find it appealing. What they wanted was to erase, to negate, to critique, to destroy. And that's ultimately what it did. And that's why, after only a few decades of this building existing, they tore it down and made the new one. And this is the final part of this presentation on the Library of Birmingham here. The newest iteration of the Birmingham Library represents to us the attempt at cobbling together a new culture. Except, since it's not organic, not sprung out of the natural bed of culture, which is ethnic homogeneity. It appears like some kind of committee-approved, AI-generated, statistical model-based Franken-culture. The high-tech, postmodern style is meant to be, quote, adaptable in a world that's always changing. And what that means is no building has any definitive character. Activities in the library are so diverse, and every room has to be amenable to updates or even radical changes in purpose as time goes on. This building is completely interchangeable with just about any other of the same style. Nothing about it makes it inherently a library. Just like modern man, you are tolerant, accepting, diversity-loving, flexible, ever-growing, ever-changing, always ready to adapt and reinvent yourself. An empty vessel. And it is no wonder that this library, as opposed to the original, was commissioned by faceless international corporations. And here I have an interview with the designer, with the architect. Let's see what she has to say about her library.
Integrated way come up with new visionary ideas, but at the end is that the architecture is at the end for the local people who live there or the users. I always say for me it's the following up of first the people, then second is the place, and third is the purpose, because there's also a philosophy that you should base very much architecture on the purpose, but I don't agree with that, because one thing for sure is in the future the purpose will change, so it's more about shaping, creating space for even changes that you cannot predict.
One thing she knows for certain is the purpose will change, and you must be able to design with changes in mind that you cannot predict. That is one very fundamental aspect of modernity. Change, constant shifting. This idea that you as an individual throughout your life are growing and developing into new things, and you have to be constantly readjusting and getting comfortable with social changes and economic changes, and you just need to go with the flow. Be more accepting, be more flexible. That's a major modern value. And the other modern values that I think are expressed in the new Library of Birmingham are alluded to in this Guardian article. So it says, if architecture was traditionally about synthesis, about composing the parts to make a unified whole, it is now about assembly. It is like the difference between joinery and flat-packed furniture, between Chippendale and IKEA, and is subject to similar questions of cost. The architect has a diminished ability to shape and order the packages, and often compensates with extravagant attempts at creative originality in the wrapping, which is an area in which he or she retains influence. So here's the largest public library in Europe. Meccano is not in fact a patsy. Its design has ambitions. The practice's leader, Francine Hubin, who we just saw, says that libraries are the cathedrals of nowadays, the most public space in the knowledge economy. The question arises, as it has done with any library built in the past 20 years, whether libraries are obsolete in the digital age, and she refutes it. Whether or not they will have books in the future, and for the time being the Library of Birmingham has plenty, they will always be about learning, no matter what you do there. Part of this learning is social. The possibility that you might discover something from conversations with other people in the building. So it's no longer just, libraries aren't just about books. They're about learning. They're about connecting. They're about having conversations with different people, getting a diverse taste of the diverse community in your local area. Hubin wants to promote the informal, to seduce people into coming in, to create surprises, and to stimulate the senses. So, diversity, incessant change, and informal surprises, stimulations of the senses, basically a house for infotainment is what this is about. It's meant to just sort of tickle your senses, to be appealing to even a child, to seduce you into coming in through this high-tech, cool, informal style of building that just, oh wow, it's so cool, it's so high-tech. Look, I wonder what's going on in there. Maybe there's a drag show tonight. Let's go check it out at the library. It's for performances. It's for a place where people can connect. Maybe what's that guy's name? Maybe some homeless black guy from the suburb will be doing a Michael Jackson impersonation there tonight. Let's go check it out, dude. Let's get high and then go check out the Michael Jackson impersonator at the library, and then after that there's a drag show. Yeah, we'll learn a lot. We'll have some really cool informal conversations, and we'll learn a lot. Yeah, I think we'll grow as a person if we go there. That is the kind of shit that these people want in your library. I mean, it's no wonder why that all over America there's been the drag queen story hour bullshit going on in the libraries, because it's being transformed. Books are about the past. Books are traditional. There's things in those books that can't be deprioritized by the Google algorithm. There's stuff in those books that's probably like old-fashioned, and we can't put like a warning label on every book saying that these are outdated ideas. So really the best thing to do is to like phase out books. Those are just relics of the past, and replace them with computers where we can have total control over the information you can receive, and get people to just have these cool informal conversations. And learning is social, so we should really just be have a conversation with a queer amputee person of color at the library, and you'll learn a lot more than if you were to just read those dusty old books. That's honestly how I feel about this whole damn culture that they're trying to promote on us. So that's all I got on the Library of Birmingham. I would like to chat just a little bit more. I'm going to play you another quick song. I'm going to go take a pee, and then I'll chat with the chat a bit, see what you guys think about the presentation. And who I want to discuss briefly? I'd like to discuss Keith Woods briefly, because I made a post about him on Twitter, and it got a lot of Keith Woods fans worked up. So if you're a Keith Woods fan, I hope you'll remain in the chat. Trying to look for the song I wanted to play. Let's see. I don't know what the hell happened to it. I'll just play this one. A good old Irish song, since we'll talk about Keith Woods a little bit after this.
On Raglan Road of an autumn day, I saw her first and knew that her dark hair would weave a snare that I might one day rule. I saw the danger and I passed along the enchanted way, and I said, let grief be a fallen leaf at the dawning of the day. On Grafton Street in November, we trip lightly along the ledge of a deep ravine where can be seen the worth of passion's pledge, the Queen of Hearts still making tarts, and I not making hay. Oh, I loved too much, and by such is happiness thrown away. I gave her gifts
of the mind. I gave her the secret sign that's known to the artists who have known the true gods of sound and stone and word and tint without stint. I gave her poems to say with her own name there and her own dark hair like clouds over fields of May. On a quiet street where all ghosts meet, I see her walking now, away from me so hurriedly. My reason must allow that I had loved not as I should, a creature made of clay. When the angels the clay he'd lose his wings at the dawn of day.
I do love me some Luke Kelly. Great singer. So, what's going on, chat? How you guys doing? I'm going to scroll up a little bit. Oh, Didymus is in the chat. What's up, Didymus? He says, E. Michael Jones was very on point with criticism of Bauhaus and the international style in architecture. Good. I actually haven't seen any of his work on that. Kalito says, this is so interesting. Thanks, AG. Thank you for watching. Didymus also says, I saw a local architectural project and it was modernist. Asked them why. They said, that's what everyone else is doing. Yeah, because it came from on high. It came from the top. Orders from the top, boss. We got to tear down the old beautiful library and build a big concrete box. Why? I don't know. It's just that's the guy who's signing my paycheck told me we have to. Okay, so Bobby Barrow says, isn't Keith Woods a Fed? I thought this was common knowledge when Keith said communism was good. People should be questioning that for sure. He's trying to push Marxism. And if you disagree with Marxism, if you think that like COVID lockdowns were a scam, then you're just a racist liberal. I can't do an Irish accent. So what happened with Keith Woods today? Okay, he posted this video.
Before we get into today's video, I want to tell you a bit about Blinkist. The Blinkist app allows you to understand the most important things from over 5,500 non-fiction books and podcasts.
Okay, Blinkist. I haven't watched Keith Wood's videos in a long time. For some reason today I was out in my truck doing tows, and I saw one of his new videos popped up. And I clicked on it, and I saw he did an ad for Blinkist. And so, as I said on Twitter here, I'm going to just go and look at my post. I said, I'm slightly bemused by the fact that ostensibly Jew-wise dissident right YouTuber Keith Woods is getting sponsored by Blinkist. Blinkist is a UN World Summit award-winning, Tel Aviv/Microsoft venture capitalist funded, diversity and LGBT supporting tech company. So here's the ad. They won, recognition from the United Nations in their education and learning. They raised 18.8 million. A very, if you're into numerology, 18.8 is a special number. Aces and eights, as they say. Aces and eights, if you don't know, is people who get into numerology like to point out aces and eights as a sort of an esoteric signaling. Make of that what you will. But 18.8 million in funding, led by venture capital firm Insight Venture Partners. And Insight Venture Partners I didn't see much more about them besides their Wikipedia page. But on the Wikipedia page, the company is headquartered in New York with offices in London, Tel Aviv, and Palo Alto. Having an office in Tel Aviv is important, in my opinion. It's not just a random place to put an office. It means that you have some serious connections with Israel. So we have this ostensibly you-know-who-ish venture capital firm funding Blinkist. These are statements, official press releases, newsletters from Blinkist. Inclusion, diversity, and belonging. What have we learned in 2021? Our commitment to diversity and inclusion is still very strong. We know that to make Blinkist inclusive, we need to do the work. So they're very much on the DIE, the DIE protocol, diversity, equity, inclusion. And a week ago, they posted this. What does best practice look like for company pride recognition? Pride Month starts next week, and if your team doesn't have a strategy for recognition, protection, and celebration, there's work to be done. So, a company that is explicitly pro-diversity, inclusion, LGBT, funded by Israeli-connected venture capital, and Microsoft-connected venture capital. Where is it? This setup, Go 1, is basically their main funder is Microsoft. So I just posted this and said, it's kind of weird. It's kind of amusing. And other people agreed that it's weird. But then a bunch of the Keith Woods fanboys, the most obnoxious fanboys, came out and just talked a bunch of shit, so saying things like, what's the point of drawing attention to this other than to hurt him and his message? It's obviously a one-off video ad, and he was lucky to score it. So why try and ruin that? We are all Jew-wise, so why try and cut off people you don't like's small revenue sources when we're all censored? And someone else says, petty jealousy. Sig asks, where's Joe Redtree? I'm friends with him on Facebook. I wish he would come back. He was a cool guy. Joe Redtree. So, my stance on just this issue is having integrity means not taking money from your enemies. Blinkist is obviously run by people who despise people like us. So if you're really an enemy of these people, integrity means not taking their money. It's a very basic, simple thing. And my argument for that is, where is it? No matter how much a person intends to stay true to their values, once you get a taste for their money, it incentivizes altering your message to retain the sponsorship deal. And this is exactly how advertisers have ruined platforms. And the money from advertisers is what has, in a lot of ways, influenced internet free speech platforms. And I said, if I were Keith's friend, if I were somebody who had his ear, and I heard he was going to take a sponsorship from Blinkist, I would have told him, dude, it's not worth it. Keep your integrity and don't take money from our enemies. You know, if your project, if your channel, if your career can't survive without bending to a sponsor like this, then something's wrong. Something has to change. It is not a good excuse to say, oh, well, I just want to get by, I just need the money. It is not a good excuse to take money from your literal enemies. Big Boss says he thinks he's playing them 7D chess. I don't know if that's what's happening. I don't know what's happening, but I would just say respectfully, don't take their damn money. Now, after making this, I found out also that Keith Woods was he got a comment from Elon Musk recently on one of his posts on Twitter. And I don't know if this happened today or yesterday or whatever, but he got a retweet from Joe Rogan. So in a short span of time, he's gotten promoted by Elon Musk, he's gotten promoted by Joe Rogan, and he's gotten a sponsorship from Blinkist. This just, it seems strange. It seems to me, if I were to be honest, just completely honest and forthright, I could be wrong. I could always be wrong. But it seems like he's being set up for something. Set up to have some kind of more publicly promoted role. Maybe in the way that Richard Spencer was back in, 2016. Who knows? But my my initial gut feeling was that, I said it here, something tells me that the kosher conservative wing, the kosher libertarian conservative right wing of the establishment, led by people like Rogan and Elon Musk, are trying to work out a better way to acknowledge, address, and put a safer spin on the JQ in the near future. And I know that people, that Keith has sort of dog whistled the JQ before, and that he's discussed Jewish power. But as I've stated in the past, his main framework of analysis is essentially Marxist and essentially abstractionist. He has talked shit about conspiracy theorists numerous times in the past. And I could imagine somebody like Keith Woods dancing this fine line, walking this fine tightrope, where he's sort of trying to dog whistle to his original base in the dissident right, acknowledging things like the JQ, but then also spinning it into this abstractionist Marxist framework, and sort of creating a safe, soft interpretation of the JQ that is sort of amenable to the establishment's interests. I can't tell you any more specific than that, but that's sort of just the feeling that I get. And I guess it'd be, if I really want to come at Keith Woods, which I'm not terribly interested in, but if I really wanted to, I should probably watch some of his videos, do a stream watching a video of his, and critiquing it in detail. Not going to do that tonight, but if any of you are interested in that, then maybe I would. But yeah, so what people have said here. Good job on getting a sponsorship. Yeah, I mean, Keith was one of the biggest proponents of the COVID narrative too, which is, that was really the last the final thing that made me stop watching any of his content, was him reinforcing and promoting the mainstream COVID narrative, even trying to spin that as good for nationalism. And now with 2020 hindsight, I think everyone should be able to see that the COVID psyop was not good for nationalism. I haven't heard any retractions from Keith on that issue. Sig says, anointed wonderkind of the mold buggerous right. Yeah, exactly. A new mold bug. I wouldn't be surprised. Just like Moldbug got onto fucking Tucker Carlson, I wouldn't be surprised if Woods was invited onto some show like Tucker Carlson. It's just a shame, in my opinion. See, and you get the dog whistle. All of Popper's grandparents were assimilated Jewish. It's just pure dog whistle, though. And people, his followers defend it by acting like he's playing this 4D chess game. Like, oh, it's about the optics. It's about presenting something that the normies will be able to follow, and then you lead them into more explicit understandings of the world. But that's never really what happens. It's never really what happens, and fundamentally, the Marxist view of history, the abstractionist method of explanation, never leads you to anything more concrete. It's a limited hangout type of situation. So Elon is chosen for sure. Yeah, Elon Musk is definitely playing a role in the establishment. I don't believe that he got to where he is today on his own. Yeah, and that's another element. Gosh, I always do this when it's the end of the day and I'm at the end of a live stream, blank out on people's names. Thultide, great guy. Thultide is an excellent content creator. He has made articles talking about how Keith Woods is part of this sort of third worldist reactionary wing of dissident right, where they love to promote China and Russia and Iran and Syria and any like non-white authoritarian regime. They promote and say that this is really a based government, based society. And they love to put the blame entirely on the American empire, the Atlanticist empire, which comes from, Dugin, Alexander Dugin. Keith Woods is, like, once again, doing the dancing on the tightrope about Dugin, where he'll promote a bunch of Duginist ideas, but if you call him a Duginist, he'll deny it. So that's one of the. He's a very slippery character where he's constantly sort of like two-facing his views on things. Bobby Barrow says, "Do you think normies are turning away from mainstream culture?" That's a hard question to ask, because I feel like mainstream culture itself is sort of dissolving. Because of the internet, people are becoming more and more sort of like filtered into different niches, and they get their culture, they get their entertainment, they get their views from certain niches that they sort of are led into by internet algorithms. And this is, I think, one of the main reasons that algorithmic engineering is so important to the rulers, and also why the internet seems to be getting smaller and smaller and smaller. If you've heard of the dead internet theory, there's so much of the internet that is essentially inaccessible to the average person. Now, unless you know the direct address of the link, of the hyperlink, or the web address, unless you know it already, it's almost impossible to reach it anymore. Google searches are trash. We could Google something. Let's Google something that should have lots and lots of results. Let's say history. Oh, hold on, I'm on the wrong. Okay, history. Look at what they claim the number of results is. 14 billion, 140 million results. But when you scroll, and they even took away pages. They took away pages. So it just keeps going, more and more results. before you used to see the results per page, and then you could go to the very last page and actually come up with a reasonable estimate for how many results you've been given. But now it's just show more results, show more results, show more results. So you can't really concretely show that Google is bullshitting you with the amount of results that they're giving you. But I saw a video where somebody showed that, you know, Google will tell you that it got over 1 billion. There we go. 219. That's all you get. Supposedly 14 billion results, you get 219. And if you include it with the omitted results, you're not going to get much more. I guarantee you're not going to get more than like maybe 40 or 50 more. So let's say you get 300 actual results when Google's trying to tell you that there's 14 billion. What a joke. And it's the same thing with YouTube. You try to search for things on YouTube that used to be easily found, and they're gone. Unless you have the link itself, they're gone. And even for a lot of the ones, if you have the link, they've been deleted, they've been pruned, they've been destroyed. So point is, with mainstream culture, since so many of the younger generation aren't partaking in some kind of centralized mainstream culture, they're going to the internet and searching things for themselves, books to read, people to chat with, videos to watch, you know, all the things that you would learn from. Since they're choosing for themselves and searching for things themselves, the elites, I think, are working double time to prune and curate the internet so that you end up being subtly nudged into a particular niche, and that the niche is safe to the rulers. Maximo says, sad. I remember what searches used to look like. Yeah, me too. Man, I remember in middle school, which would have been like 2003 to 2006, and we were learning how to search Google on like the school computers, and you could find anything. It was like there weren't these mega sites that were sponging up all the results. The internet was truly an amazing place back then. Sig says, definition of madick, 8 billion results. Gromby says, the fake or inaccessible search results is a big red pill. Yeah. You know, if somebody's actually really thinking about what's going on in the world and how the internet works and all that, the fact that Google is this Potemkin village giving this fake impression of having billions of results, but then only giving you a couple hundred, that should get people to open their eyes a little bit, you'd think. Interdimensional Harmony says, I wish I was here from the beginning. I don't know exactly what you're talking about, but I can surmise it's about censorship and revisionism from the title. Well, the beginning was sort of a history of this one particular library in England called the Library of Birmingham, and the different stages of architecture that it's gone through. So what I'm talking about now is completely unrelated. I'm just sort of riffing with the chat, and talked about Keith Woods for a little bit. Now I'm just chatting with you guys. So if you want to go back, I mean, the first 45 minutes to an hour was about the Library of Birmingham and the effects of architecture on society. So I'd recommend going back and rewatching that if you can, but now I'm just chatting. Vic Vinegar says, have you ever heard of Bamboo Delight or the Sumerian Swindle? I have heard of the Sumerian Swindle. That's a fascinating book. I only got 4 or 5 chapters into it. But from what I read, it was really good. Can you tell me more about Bamboo Delight? Because I doubt, speaking of how shit Google is these days, I doubt I'll be able to find it unless I know some other keywords to include. Bobby Biro. I've noticed that too. People have half of a narrative that's kosher approved. QAnon seems like the first major attempt at putting people in a niche. Yeah, these niches are super important because you have to make people feel like they are self-directing. You have to make people feel like they're making their own choices. And that's the beauty of these, the twisted beauty of these algorithms and the way that they've developed it, because it makes people feel like they're defining their own experience, they're curating their own content. But in reality, it's not like that. It's being fed to them. Sig by Bam Joe Billy, is that Bamboo Delight? Is that what we're talking about? Interdimensional Harmony says, absolutely, you often find insights on history that I know very little about. I know you have a busy family life, so I appreciate when you take the time to stream. Thank you. I'm moving at the end of the month to Canada, to Quebec. And one of the great things about the place we're going to be living in, our new abode, is we're going to have a lot more room. I'll have my own room for a new computer room for streaming. And that's important because right now I'm streaming in my my workshop, essentially the basement workshop. This is let's see. You want to view behind the curtain, behind the green curtain, like in the Wizard of Oz. Vice there. So I'm not in a very comfortable room, and I'm like 2 paper thin walls away from where my kids are sleeping. So I have to be quiet, and I usually have to, really pick and choose times that will be acceptable to the whole family. So Potato says, I recently bought a merino wool sweater plus t-shirts. Pretty good so far, and you can wear them for multiple days without much stink. A bit itchy, but I am a wool respecter now. Great. So you're wearing wool right now, though? What are you, in the southern hemisphere, or are you so far north that you're still wearing wool here in the heat of June? Vic Vinegar says it's the author of the Sumerian Swindle's linked website. Oh, so that's the website's name, okay. Yeah, I enjoy this kind of historical speculation. Definitely worth at least giving a try if you haven't read this yet. I liked in particular his comparison of the Jews to the thuggies of India. Slow Mosaic says, first heard you on Millennial Woe's Yule stream a few years ago. Yeah, those were good times. Back when I was invited to Millennial Woe's Millennial. Wasn't invited the last couple years. I don't know. I feel kind of, I really don't know if it's my fault or if it's just because I'm not entirely interested in sort of like the social dynamics of the dissident right, or if I'm just too abrasive, or I don't know what it is, but it seems like a lot of those sort of like old school dissident right people who have been around for years, since 2015, 2016, a lot of the people that I saw as sort of compatriots in sort of the fight for our people and the fight against globalism and all that, quite a few of them I feel like they don't want anything to do with me, that I'm not entirely welcome amongst them. So I don't know what happened. I could be pretty critical. I can be pretty polemical. I like to argue. I like to debate. But as far as I'm concerned, if you're, a defender of our people, of the white race, and you're against globalism, no matter how much or how harshly I criticize, I still feel like we're on the same side. And I mean, maybe it comes from my own family dynamics where I argue with my family like crazy, but then as soon as the argument's over, we're close again. Red Ice did have me on, and I really appreciated that. I like Henrik. I like what he does. He messaged me and wanted me to come back at some point for another interview, and I ended up like forgetting to message him back, and time went on, and after such a long period of time, after I realized, I blew off Henrik, I ended up just like feeling sort of like embarrassed and ashamed, and I just never really got back to him. I kind of just completely blew him off, and I still feel bad about that. If Henrik is watching, or if if anybody who knows Henrik is listening, I hope he knows that I'm really bad at keeping up with what might be called my internet obligations. I'm just really it's not a good habit of mine to blow people off the way I do. Gromby says you might just be assuming too much. Yeah, I probably am, but I know for a fact that there's at least a couple people who are sort of like enmeshed in the dissident right, social milieu, that don't like me. I got blocked by somebody. I get ignored by other people. It is what it is. Go back and guest host Flashback Friday. The Barking Snail says, Jeremy is so cool and aloof. It's a bad habit. Well, I think it's getting pretty late, guys. And, Barrow, I also care more about the ideas than gossip. And yeah, there's, in any social niche, there's a tendency to sort of create these little social groups and for gossip and stuff to fly around, and yeah. All right, fellas, if there's no more direct questions, then I think I'm going to call it a night. I really appreciate you all joining me here, and hope you enjoyed my presentation about the Library of Birmingham, and hope to see you again soon. Take care, and good night. I'll maybe play one more song on the way out, just as a bookend here.
Hey, little girl, is your daddy home? Did he go and leave you all alone? Oh, I'm on fire. Tell me now, baby, is it good to you? Will he do to you the things that I do for you? I'm gonna take you higher. Oh, I'm on fire. Sometimes it's like someone took a knife, edgy and dull, and drove a 6-inch valley through the middle of my soul. But at night I wake up with the sheets soaking wet and the freight train running through the middle of my head. You cool my desire. Oh, I'm on fire. little girl, is your daddy home? Did he go and leave you all alone again? I've got a bad desire. Oh, I'm on fire. Tell me now, baby, is he good to you? Is he good to you the things that I do for you? I'll take you higher. Oh, I'm on fire. Sometimes it's like someone took a knife, lazy and dull, and drove a snake valley through the middle of my soul.